So there's a lot of stuff that's happening in DC right now, and it's hard to keep track. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And there's definitely somebody that I wanted to bring on today to the Katie Fang News Channel. It's Congressman Jake Auchincloss. And part of the reason why is not only is this particular congressman a part of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, but you'd be surprised to learn what falls under the auspices of that particular committee. It may not be so obvious to some, but I wanted to make sure that we were dialed in to the latest. So, Congressman, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Katie.
Well, so Congressman, so we were just talking actually before we decided to hit, go with this, that your committee actually has within its auspices things like the health issues that have been arising with RFK Jr. And people maybe didn't expect to hear that when it deals with things like, energy and commerce. So kind of really briefly, get our viewers dialed in as to why these kind of fall within the auspices of your committee.
Energy and Commerce is, I think, the second oldest committee in Congress and has basically just accreted policy areas over the last 150 years. So now it covers healthcare, including Medicare and Medicaid. It has energy, it has the environment, it has social media and technology like AI and the big social media platforms. So its writ runs very far.
And this is exactly why I wanted our viewers to know this, because you then, like I said at the beginning, you're completely kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening. So I wanted to highlight for our viewers, there is a letter that you wrote to the board of directors at True Medicine, Inc. And it's a pretty compelling letter. And you're basically seeking answers to questions about potential conflicts of interest. And I want to highlight a couple of things from the letter. You say that TrueMed's value has increased nearly threefold since this man, his name is Callie Means, a co-founder of TrueMed. He actually serves as a, quote, special government employee to RFK Jr., who is our HHS secretary. And Mr. Means's role is actually pretty powerful, Congressman, right? He's actually driving the Make America Healthy Again initiative from the Trump administration. So the value of his company has increased nearly threefold, concurrent alongside his appointment, which when there's smoke is fire is what I like to say. But also the fact that Mr. Means has publicly stated that TrueMed is intending to route federal funds out of providing for government programs and into expanding HSAs. I mean, it seems to me pretty obvious on its face that there is a glaring conflict of interest for somebody like Mr. Means to be in the role that he has as a special government employee.
Yes. And what this is about is spotlighting the grift in this administration, collecting the receipts, and preparing to investigate and fight back. There are two individuals who are the top lieutenants to RFK Jr. who have the most glaring conflicts of interest. The first is Callie Means. Think of him as like the Maha chief in the administration. He has been very influential in basically bridging the divide between the Maha movement and the MAGA movement. So he actually has appointments at the White House and with RFK. What Callie Means does is he runs a company on the side called TrueMed, and TrueMed helps people use health savings accounts, which are basically pre-tax dollars. And there's nothing wrong with HSAs, but he also used pre-tax dollars to buy supplements and wellness items that candidly have no scientific evidence or FDA approval behind them. So things like saunas for wealthy people, or supplements or vitamins that just have no safety or efficacy studies behind them. He helps you use pre-tax dollars, basically a public tax credit for individuals to buy this stuff. And wouldn't you know it, since he's been at the administration, they have radically sought to expand the use of these health savings accounts for, you guessed it, wellness and health supplements that have no FDA approval behind them. So we're probing that. But candidly, this is actually not even the worst example. The worst example is Brad Smith. Brad Smith runs a health services company known as Main Street Health that basically sells healthcare products to Medicare and Medicaid. And its biggest investors are the five biggest health insurance companies that are regulated by Medicare. So United Health Group and Cigna, et cetera. He was the head of Doge Healthcare. So he was the guy who did all the firings and all of the manhandling of HHS employees for the first 100 days. And what he did when he was there is he changed the rules and the regulations and the reimbursements for Medicare to hook up his investors at Main Street Health. So this was very convenient for Brad Smith. And now he is getting to cycle back into the private sector and retain his special influence and status within the administration at the same time.
I mean, that's wild. I mean, on its face, again, it's the whole, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, it's a duck. I mean, I know that in your letter, you're asking for questions to be answered. What's your optimism, though, that these actual questions are going to be answered?
I doubt these companies are going to respond, although they should. And once we take back the House next November, I'm going to be pushing very hard for these to become full investigations. One, because the American public deserves accountability. When people abuse their positions of public trust, they should be held accountable for that. And two, because we need to inspire trust in our public health system. Trust has been depleted over the last 5 years because of COVID, because of some of the conspiracy theories and quackery that RFK has pumped out into the ecosystem, because of some legitimate bad behavior, for sure, by actors in our healthcare system. And if we're going to reinstill trust with people, they have to know that when they get guidance from federal employees, it's because that's what's best for Americans, not what's best for their company.
So there was also another portion of this letter, and we're going to make sure it's up for everybody to read. But there was a portion of your letter wherein you note that this guy, Callie Means from TrueMed, that one of TrueMed's competitors has filed an official complaint alleging that Means used his government position to pressure them into transacting with TrueMed, threatening them with involvement of NIH directors and Secretary Kennedy in negotiations. I mean, listen, I know you're a Massachusetts guy. That is full on mafioso style dealings. And I'm saying it, you're not, but it's crazy that these are the types of allegations. And yet you and I both know it's not that crazy because it is the Trump administration.
And it would have been easier if the administration hadn't fired the inspectors general the second they took office, right? Like, this is exactly the kind of stuff that needs to be run down. And candidly, if I were Callie Means, I would want it to be run down, right? If my good name is being imperiled by people, and if it's not true, then have an investigation, put the facts in front of a candid world, right? But opacity helps no one, certainly not the whistleblower nor the accused.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, one of my questions was, is there any watchdog or agency that's able to give you a lift when it comes to this? Because I note that you say that once we take the House back in November of 2026, it makes a difference, right? But in the meantime, you get zero official lift in terms of help, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a functioning administration that had the proper internal checks and balances, you'd have an Office of Inspector General, you'd have the Office of Civil Rights Enforcement, you'd have the Department of Justice, and they would all have various degrees of firewalls and independence to do this kind of investigation. My confidence in that happening, Katie, it's just basically zero. I just think there's no chance that the MAGA world holds itself to account. And so it really comes on Congress and our oversight and investigations function. I walked across the aisle with these letters and I offered the chair of our health subcommittee, who's a Republican, I said, please work with me on this. I will work with you on the verbiage of these letters if to make this easier for you, maybe. I mean, I'm here to make this bipartisan because it'll be more powerful. Said no. So we got to collect the receipts. We got to prepare the investigations, and we got to hit back when we take back the House.
So, I'm a big fan of name them and shame them. I think that's important. Who's the chair of your subcommittee?
Congressman Buddy Carter from Georgia.
Oh, Buddy Carter. We're going to spend some time looking into Buddy Carter from Georgia. Let's shift gears a little bit. Another fantastic cabinet appointee, Pete Hegseth. I only have to laugh because it would make me cry. Currently undergoing some grueling and appropriately grueling questions during a hearing right now. One of the questions asked of him was the following by Senator Warren. He was asked, do you continue to defend your decision to rename military bases that were named after Confederate leaders? And he said, quote, what we're looking at is erasing history. And he said he was totally fine. That is in conjunction with his decision that was just announced that another 2,000 National Guardsmen are now being deployed to the LA area. That will be in addition to the 700 Marines that have already been deployed, as well as 2,100 National Guardsmen that already are present in LA. You, sir, served, and I thank you for your service, in the United States Marines in Afghanistan and Panama. Your thoughts on what we're seeing happening? I know we're waiting for a decision from the Ninth Circuit in California from that lawsuit brought by California Governor Gavin Newsom. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this idea of now even more National Guardsmen being deployed to LA.
So first, it's illegal. It's a violation of posse comitatus. And briefly, posse comitatus states that the president cannot use the military for law enforcement purposes. And there's a few exceptions under the Insurrection Act. And both the Posse Comitatus Act and the Insurrection Act, frankly, are badly written and overly broad, and Congress should fix that.
And very old, and very, very old, yes.
Very old. And the exceptions to Posse Comitatus are with not even close to being met by Los Angeles. The exceptions really should be two things. One is an actual insurrection. Think of like the Civil War, or for that matter, January 6th, when I will note the president refused to call up the National Guard. And the second would be if a class of Americans are being systemically deprived of their constitutional rights. So think of like desegregating the schools in the Deep South in the 1960s.
Yeah.
Those are really the only two instances in American history where Insurrection Act-like authorities are appropriate for a president. Los Angeles is not in rebellion. The LAPD has stated plainly, we have the resources and training to handle this. And in fact, the deployment of the Marines will be an operational logistical challenge, as it has proven to be. So it's illegal. And when a judge orders it, the Marine commander needs to return those Marines to the barrack ASAP, because he's under an obligation to follow lawful orders, but not unlawful orders. But second, and to me, more personally to me, is it's really unfair to these Marines. I trained in 29 Palms. I was a platoon commander there. These Marines, and you got to remember, of the 700 Marines who were there, probably 600 of them are 25 years old or younger. These are kids. And these kids signed up to sweat and bleed for their country. They did not sign up to be political props for Donald Trump. And that's what they're being used as. Their training is not consonant with crowd control. Their training is military operations on urbanized terrain. They are training fires on buildings, clearing out those buildings room by room, and taking over city block by city block hostile terrain. That is not Los Angeles. I mean, it's just a totally unfair scenario to put them in.
And, I'm glad you bring that up, because training is critical. And these Marines, they're not being trained for crowd management, for lack of a better phrase, right? I mean, I'm not saying that they're being trained to be killing machines. That's not what I'm saying, but they're trained for confrontation is pretty much what they're trained for. And if you put them in a situation or environment where, again, there's bad apples, obviously, in every bunch, but where you have 99% peaceful protesting that's going on, respectfully, constitutionally guaranteed and protected conduct that is happening through the First Amendment, peaceful assembly and expression of free speech. When you have that happening, and then you actually put in, I'd say it's like adding a spark to a little bit of some gunpowder, right? Because it's definitely not the right ideal situation.
Totally. And actually, these Marines are trained to be killing machines. I think we have to hold that true. These are not military police. These are not logistics battalions. These are infantry Marines. Their mission is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. So they are oriented towards the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps or the People's Liberation Army. And they are not trained to de-escalate. They are trained to finish a fight. And which is why a deployment of forces overseas is such a momentous decision that requires congressional consent, because we are sending young Americans to go wage real violence against enemies of the American Republic. And it's so inappropriate to put them in an American city, again, really as political props. They're not suited for de-escalation. And your point about civil liberties is so critical. The standards for warfare are the law of armed conflict. You do have to distinguish between civilians and combatants. You have to have proportional responses, but there is no Bill of Rights in armed conflict. There is no sort of habeas corpus or freedom of expression given to a civilian population in wartime conditions. And so these Marines just, again, not set up constitutionally for this role. And you've got a bunch of 25-year-old corporals and sergeants who are having to bear this burden. And it's just so unfair to them.
Yeah, and they're pitting Americans against Americans. Exactly. And that is the worst thing you can do. Again, I think it adds a volatility, a potential for violence. And I do think it is intentional. It is exactly what Donald Trump wants. It's exactly what this administration wants to do. I often speak, not only on my social media, but on here on YouTube and otherwise, about people becoming engaged. I also speak about their level of comfort. Some people don't want to go out and protest, Congressman. Some people want to just maybe have a book club or a wine club or a coffee club, or just want to, be able to talk about these issues. But I do encourage people to realize that much of their democracy and politics is local. And I noted when I was obviously preparing to speak with you that you were a 3-term city councilman in Newton, in Massachusetts. And that was obviously before you went to Congress. And I love that. And I want you to speak about that with the people that are tuning in and watching right now, because I think that type of political engagement can be incredibly rewarding because it is something that's happening in your own backyard. But I do think it's the kind of stuff we also still need to be focusing on. Yes, the federal government is important. Your job as a congressman is important, but your job as a city councilman is also, or city councilor, is just as important as your role in DC.
It's where I fell in love with public service. Katie, I love this question. And it's something I say to young people all the time. Unfortunately, one of the trends of our last 25 years, and you've seen this as well as I have, is the nationalization of our politics.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy. And our founders understood this. Our founders thought of this country really as a federated republic, as a bunch of different communities coming together and deconflicting big issues in Washington, but a lot of the governance happening at the state and local level. And that's healthy. If you think about some of the issues that matter most to people, right? Education, K-12 education in particular, public safety, housing, transportation. These are local issues. These are things that you go to your city council, your school committee, your mayor, your select board, and you talk to them about. You can affect real change. And it doesn't have to be everything all at once. It can be one issue that in your area that you want to see improved. To that end, one thing I really encourage people to do is please, please, please support or even found local news. The decline of local news in this country, to me, is one of the great enablers of our post-truth politics. We need local reporting to hold mirrors up to communities, to hold local politicians to account, and to get Americans engaged once again in local governance.
I'm going to actually give a huge shout out to local journalism. I grew up in Miami, Florida. The Miami Herald has been tip of spear on a lot of incredible breaking news, but I always give a shout out to the Texas Tribune and other local papers, including the Boston Globe, for example, right? There's stuff that is happening and the dissemination of the information. I love the fact that you note that it is the best weapon against a, misinformation, disinformation universe. That is a favored environment. It's the ideal ecosystem for Trump and the GOP these days.
That's right.
Well, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy. I will continue to follow what is happening, especially with these MAHA conflicts of interest. But thank you also for your particular lens of insight into what's happening with the deployment of the National Guardsmen and the military to our own American cities. It's an incredibly fragile time. And so your analysis and your time spent with us is so valuable. So thank you for that.
Katie, thanks for having me on. And the public pressure is working. I do want to close with that. When there is solidarity and public pressure against these authoritarian actions, the stove gets hot and they pull their hand back.
Oh, I like that. That works. Thanks, Congressman.
Take care.
Katie Fang here. The truth matters now more than ever. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.